This is number 83, Abuelo and the Nieto talking Miami sports. We're going to be talking about the Heat, of course, the Kings, also basketball, and Inter Miami. The Marlins doing very well at the beginning of the season, huh? Surprising start. This is number 83, presented by Balado Tires, two locations in Miami to serve you better. Tyler, a great number 83, right?
Yes, a number 83. If you're a Dolphins fan, it's like part of your initiation to know who this guy is. Part of one of the best aerial attacks that the NFL has really ever seen, and that will always be in that ring of honor forever. Who is it?
Yes, who can forget Mark Clayton, Tyler, five-time Pro Bowler, the Mark brothers, and they were together back in '85, the season of '84 with Marino. His great year with the Dolphins, and of course, got beat in the Super Bowl pretty bad versus the 49ers.
Yep. Well, speaking of, well, no, we're actually gonna do some Heat talk because I mean, we mentioned in the previous podcast and some clips that we've done. It's the point of time where they need to look forward to next season, think about how they're going to rebuild and restructure this team for the future. How do you think they're going to approach this? Are they going to strip the team bare? Are they going to kind of try to hold on to a few key pieces and try to see what the value of the rest of their team has in the trade market? Because I do think they have some desirable players on their team, especially if it's a team looking to add, one more or two more contributors.
Yeah, it's a tough situation, Tyler, because they're number 10, and I don't know, they have a shot at maybe number 9. So that means play in, probably being away for 2 games if they win the first one. So it's a tough situation. They got Charlotte and Philadelphia right in front of them with a couple of games in front. So it's very complicated. Losing those 2 games pretty bad against Toronto was something that hurt them quite a bit, and they just not been playing well, losing 10 out of the last 13. So when you play like that, you're not going anywhere. And to tell the truth, they're not going anywhere, even if they go in and if they win the play-in, and let's say they're number 8. So I believe, Tyler, that there needs to be some kind of rebuild. Either they go through the draft and go young and get rid of basically most of the players, and 90% of the players. But that's not the history of the Heat, and especially that is not Pat Riley. So I think that the move is to try to get a whale, go for Giannis. And if you don't have Giannis, then maybe a shark, someone that is maybe not quite at that level. But then to do that, you're going to have to move some pieces. Maybe Tyler Hero, Powell. Those are all possibilities, and then probably some of the young players, maybe Larson or Ware, and maybe Hackes, and then you build through that. So I think they're going either way, and I mean that's what's smart. That's what would be smart to do. I don't think that you keep this same group the same way that it is right now, because it's just not working. So either of those two possibilities that I said, signing a guy like Giannis, or maybe signing a guy that might be just a little below the Giannis, because there are not too many Giannis out there, right? So, and then you have to move some of your pieces, and that is the way that they probably will be going, if they can get that kind of a player, because it always is very difficult. A trade like that, it becomes difficult. But they have pieces. They have pieces that some people will be interested in. So they're not in a bad position to make those moves, but I do believe that they will be making moves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they have to at least put themselves in the lottery for him. They have to at least make it very clear that they're welcoming him, that they would give up whatever they have to get Giannis, even if it's not possible. I do think that the Bucks are going to be smart, similarly to the way that Portland was with giving him up to Miami. They might not be necessarily inclined to do that, so that might be what's preventing it. But it's not just him. I think there are a few other names that can get this team on the right track, and I think they just need to reestablish an identity. I think it's proven that the way this team is approaching basketball isn't going to win games, and they need to have a new identity and an approach, like we said.
Yeah, and that's that fast offense at the end of the season. It didn't really prove that it was working either. It was not. It was not just the defense. Tyler Balado Tire, 63 years established in Miami, two locations: Northwest 16th Street and 27th Avenue, also Southwest 8th Street and 67th Avenue. If you're looking for tires, Tyler, the place to go is Balado Tires. They have the personal servers that everybody desires. Balado Tires.
Yes, Balalo Tires. Marlins. Continuing still. An interesting, exciting young team. These guys are so surprising. Beginning of the season, got good pitching, good production on the offensive end. We mentioned few games ago there was obviously that issue with Sandy where he wasn't too fond of getting pulled out a bit early. But overall, things seem to be in good spirits for this team and trending in the right direction. What's been your takeaways having watched these first stretch of the season?
Yeah, 8-5. Tyler is excellent. Tied for first place as you go into the weekend versus the Tigers, a tough team that has not been playing well. By the way, at the beginning of the season, one of the favorites in the American League. So you go away for that series, 8-5, tied with the Braves, first place. You can ask for more. That's one of the best beginnings in the history of the club. So surprising the hitting because we talked about the hitting. Are they going to score enough runs at the beginning of the season? And it's still very early. They're scoring runs and they're getting the hitting. From the young guys, which basically they're a very young team. Edwards is number 2 in the majors in hitting with 396. Casey, the guy that got on the trade, he's doing his job, 324. Lopez, 333. At Hicks, he's been hitting pretty well. He was number 1 in RBIs about a few days back. So, and the pitching is pretty solid. Myers has been doing the job, Perez, and of course, Alcantara. Alcantara is the horse, 2-0. You mentioned that he came off, in the last inning, and he was throwing a shutout last game, versus the Reds, and they ended up getting beat. That's a game they could have won, and they would have had 9 wins already at this, at this spot of the season. So McCall is doing a great job, the manager with this team, and it looks good right now. That division is very tough, Tyler. And of course, you have the Mets, the Braves, the Phillies. So you have to think that maybe it's a wild card. But right now, they're in a good position for a wild card, and I'm really impressed, especially with the hitting. If that hitting continues, Tyler, things look pretty good for the Marlins.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think it's just positive to have such a good start to the season because we see times where maybe they get off to a slow start and they start to pick it up midway through the season later on. And by that point, I think the fan base is checked out. But I think getting off to a strong start to the season gets people aware right away and, gets them kind of involvement in the mix of the season. Obviously, baseball seasons are long, so you want that involvement, right off the bat. New stadium in Inter Miami, seems to be a success. Itself, mentioned not necessarily producing offensively the way they're expected, with such firepower on that end, at least. You know, I guess wondering what you think, first of all, we've talked about the stadium over the past few weeks, but now with it being open, what you've heard, rumblings throughout the city, and then also, from the team as well, what you're seeing.
Well, not everything was ready for the first game. They got the certificate, a temporary certificate, at the last minute. So, they're still doing work there, but the actual stadium inside is unbelievable, Tyler. Impressive. Two very big video boards on each side. And people were impressed, those seats, black, gray, white, pink, they look great with the names Inter Miami. You can look at that. The Garza there also at one of the ends of the stadium, and it just looked great. And some of the comments, Tyler, were very impressive. People were saying, and the experts that have been through all the different MLS stadiums, that definitely is the best MLS stadium in the league, and it's got that European look to it, the way that it's been built. So I think that you have to give all the credit to Beckham and Jorge Mas and the Mas brothers for their job. And we have a brand new stadium that people really are enjoying. Now, what we need, Tyler, is more production, like you said,
Yeah.
from that offense of Inter Miami. They're in pretty good place. Number three in the East. They playing the Red Bulls this weekend, this Saturday. Hopefully, that that stadium, especially the surroundings, will be in better shape. I keep using Metro Rail and try rail. Okay, that is the best way to get to the stadium and more comfortable for the fans. And Messi is very much alone offensively. He got a goal. They got a goal from Luis Suarez in last game. They were able to tie Austin, which is a team that is inferior to them. Still some problems defensively, especially we have mentioned it from last year. Some of the speed on those defenders. If you can get a quick, fast player on them, sometimes they get beat. And they had a long ball where they got beat in one of the goals, so that is a problem. And you need the help from Berterame and from Allende in particular. They have not scored, so it can not only be Messi. It's got to be other guys that show up offensively. When that starts happening, then it is a very tough team to beat in the MLS. Tyler, Balado Tires, 63 years established in Miami with all the best models of tires. They're very competitive with their prices. If you're looking for tires, the place to go is Balado Tires. Tyler, when he's here in Miami, hopefully he's not going to have any problems with his tires, but if he does, he knows where he has to go, right?
Yes.
If
Miami
you don't go,
Hurricanes.
if you don't have, you're gonna have a problem if you don't go there. You have a problem with your tires.
Yeah, no, I would be a traitor if I didn't go
Yeah,
there. I just got to get a car first. But
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, so that'll be the next step. Yeah, Miami Hurricanes, obviously, college basketball season now being done. Pretty solid year for them, but Jay Lucas rebounding after, or just I would say rebuilding the program. You see the improvement over the years. A few guys outgoing in the transfer portal, a few players who've entered their name. I'd say True Washington probably being the most notable among them. Also Trayvon Maddox, John LeBoy, and Noam Dobrat. Uh, no, no buzz necessarily about a particular prospect that's going to come over just yet. In terms of like maybe a top 3, top 5 list, but once the portal really gets going, I think this will. It'll be. We mentioned the Heat being a desirable option. I also think Miami will be as well. I think to a team that is up and coming. You see they have a good young coach, a player's coach, the type of guy that you might want to play for, as a young guy looking for a new opportunity. So, I would imagine them at least being a competitor for some, accomplished big names, maybe some guys that maybe played at a smaller school and lit it up last year and, are ready to make that jump as well. And I think in college basketball transfer portal, that's where you see, the most or the most notable moves. It's a guy who played at a D2 school or a smaller school and they climb up, because if you're transferring, from a bigger school to another big school, that might be for a bad reason, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, they had Charles, center from Georgia, a 6'11" guy, come in Friday for a visit, and that is a possibility there. A guy that maybe offensively is not going to give you as much, but he averaged 9 points last season. He's a great defensive player, and those are the guys that Lucas likes. And he's got good size. And they're talking about Duke Harris as a possibility, the point guard from Wake Forest, averaged 21 points. So let's see if they can bring him in because they need a point guard, after losing Donaldson is a key guy, key player on that team, losing Allen also. I mean, not Allen. Allen is coming back, but Renault is an important guy, losing the center also, good rebounder. So, they need some key players. They lost between Porto and guys that graduated, Tyler, 7 players. So they need some guys back, and having Henderson and Allen, the freshman from last season, uh, and Malebek is very important for the team. I think that those guys are going to help. And a very important guy, Tyler, is a guy from Columbus, from your former school, the forward 6'7". I don't know if you pronounce it Gakins or Gakins, something like that is his last name. Maybe you know. But that guy, the 6'7" guy, is one of the top players in the country. So definitely it's going to help. So Lucas is a very good recruiter, Tyler. So and with that performance, 26-9, being number 3 in the ACC, I think they're in a good position to get some top guys in the portal, and I think that they'll do well again next season. That's my prediction for the Canes. Tyler, what do you have for top young or established Miami player as far as a feature today?
Yes. We're kind of gonna take a brief look back. This is a guy who, during my time at Columbus, was a star player and on to be very productive at FIU. His name was Austin Maloney. Austin Maloney was part of the Columbus team that reached their first state championship in 20 years during his time there with Alejandro Ross, Tucker Byrne, and was very productive. Set all records, was a first team all day wide receiver at Columbus, and ended up losing in the state championship. But then he went on to FIU, spent 4 years there as a starting receiver, 104 total receptions, 1,700 yards, 9 touchdowns. But the most notable thing there, he was the leading receiver on that team that beat Miami when FIU beat Miami a few years ago. So for the Columbus kid, never got recruited by Miami, to go to FIU and then score a couple touchdowns, have some catches, that was a pretty cool moment, for especially if you were a Columbus guy who got to see him play. So, never got a chance at the NFL, but was more of a, just a really productive player, great route runner, caught the ball in traffic. So, shout out to Austin Maloney. I probably haven't heard that name in a while, but.
All right. Before we get to the Miami Sports Trivia, I remind you again, if you're looking for tires, Balado Tires, 2 locations in Miami to serve you better. That is a family business. It is a family business, and they're going to treat you like family. Balado Tires. Sports Trivia, Miami Sports Trivia. Tyler, you going to go first or I go first?
I'll let you go first.
All right. I go first. Tyler, they should be, I don't know. I'm not sure whether you're going to handle it or not. Which year did the Heat start playing in the NBA? And as extra credit, and the extra credit is pretty easy, who was their first coach?
Ron Rothstein was their first coach, and they
Yes.
started playing in. I'm between 2 years, so either 1988 or 87.
88. You got
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
88,
Oh,
89 season was the first season for the Heat. And Rothstein was there, which was rough those first 3 years, the first 3 seasons. What do you have for me?
the great Ron Rothstein. Yes. If you grew up watching
Still,
Miami Heat
still
basketball,
working, still working for the Heat, and then won a
you
title as
watch.
an assistant coach.
Yeah, yeah. If you're a kid who grew up watching Heat basketball, you'd see at halftime he'd go and he'd draw up the little stuff there. So big
He,
part of.
he's, he still does. He still does.
Yeah, yeah. That's a Heat legend there for sure, Ron Rothstein. This one is another local legend. This is somebody who deserves. I'm giving you a lot of hints. This is somebody who deserves a Miami spotlight for sure. Miami Hurricanes, who has the most all-purpose yards in Miami Hurricanes history. So that's including rushing, receiving, and returning. This is and I'll even give you a better hint. This is a
Uh,
Miami guy who went to Carroll
Miami
City.
guy, a high Miami high school player, right?
He played at Carroll City, and he had a pretty successful long NFL career. Um, he's kind of built.
Santana Moss.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Good job.
All right. Santana Moss, I did a lot of his games, Tyler. Small, but extremely quick and tough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love watching him growing up. Him and his brother Sonoris went on to have a pretty solid career at University of Miami, and he was And yeah, Santana Moss, went on to play for the Redskins, the Jets, and was just a dynamic receiver in the NFL too. As a slot receiver, if you grow up, you watch Santana Moss, his route running, his after the catch, just such a tough player. So, somebody that is a borderline NFL Hall of Famer too, and a Hall of Famer definitely.
And you learn from him, Tyler. You as a receiver, you learn a little
Yeah,
bit from him.
not enough, but I learned a little bit. Yeah.
Tyler, we done it again. Number 83, Abuelo and the Nieto. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. And like I always say, arrivederci. Hasta luego.